Good morning and welcome everybody to the presentation of the second quarter results for the Labour Force Survey. My name is Jim Dalton. I'm a statistician in the CSO's Labour Market Analysis area. Before we talk about the data aspect of today's presentation, I want to first mention that the CSO published an updated information note yesterday in relation to the impact of COVID-19 on the LFS, and the link to this is included on your presentation document. COVID-19 continues to have a very significant impact on data collection for the LFS. As you will have been aware, all face-to-face interviews were suspended at the onset of the crisis, and as a result, all household interviews continue to be carried out by telephone since then. Furthermore, you'll be aware that the LFS is published using the International Labour Organization definitions of employment, unemployment and inactivity. These are the international standard, and by EU regulation, the CSO is obliged to compile labour market estimates according to these concepts and definitions. And like previous quarters, the results today have been compiled in this standard way. The CSO began publishing COVID-19 adjusted estimates of unemployment as part of the monthly unemployment estimates released for March 2020. These can be considered the upper bound for unemployment. The latest COVID-19 adjusted unemployment estimates were published on the 5th of August last for July 2020, and the estimates for the end of June 2020 and the end of July 2020 are included in the LFS release today. You will recall that the CSO made COVID-19 adjusted employment estimates available as part of the LFS release for Q1 this year. These can be considered as the lower bound for unemployment. COVID-19 adjusted employment volumes and rates are made available today in the LFS for the end of June and the end of July 2020. Separate to the LFS, we are also publishing today the first in a series of bulletin-style labour market insights. These are designed to provide high-level supplementary analysis to users alongside the current outputs and metrics. The data from them is sourced from the LFS and administrative data sets. The bulletin being published today is specifically designed to give some context to the LFS results for Q2. Further iterations are likely to provide extra detail and focus on specific aspects of the labour market. Before we talk about the data for Q2, let me first return to the ILO definitions and give you an overview of them. Firstly, a person is classified as employed if during the reference week he or she works for 1 hour or more for payment of profit, including work on the family farm or business. And secondly, if a person was away from work during the reference week but had a job to return to. A person is classified as unemployed if during the reference week he or she was not working, first of all, had taken active steps to seek employment in the previous 4 weeks, and is available to work in the 2 weeks after the reference week. Finally, a person is classified as inactive if he or she does not fulfill the conditions for being either employed or unemployed. However, specific rules govern the ILO status of persons who are temporarily laid off from their job, depending on the degree of attachment to the job. This impacts labour market status as follows. A person is classified as still being employed if the expected period of absence is within 3 months, or if the person continues to be paid at least half their wage or salary where the period of absence extends beyond 3 months. A person is classified as unemployed if the expected period of absence is more than 3 months, or if it's unknown and the person continues to receive less than half its wage or salary from its employer. And secondly, the person has taken active steps in the 4 weeks prior to the survey to find work and is available for work within the 2 weeks after the survey. If the person fails to meet the conditions for being unemployed, he will or she will be classified as being inactive. Turning now to the headline numbers for today, and using the standard ILO criteria, the unadjusted number of persons aged 15 years and over in employment stood at 2,222,500 in Q2, with an associated employment rate of 65.7% for those aged 15 to 64 years. At the end of June 2020, the COVID-19 adjusted measure of employment, or the lower bound of the number of persons aged 15 years and over in employment, is estimated to have been 1,783,567, with an associated COVID-19 adjusted employment rate of 52.2% for those aged 15 to 64 years. Using the standard ILO criteria, the unadjusted number of persons aged 15 to 74 years who were unemployed in Q2 of this year stood at 118,700, with an associated unemployment rate of 5.1% for those aged 15 to 74 years. At the end of June 2020, the COVID-19 adjusted measure of unemployment, or the upper bound of the number of persons aged 15 to 74 years who were unemployed, was 531,412, with an associated COVID-19 adjusted unemployment rate of 23.1% for those aged 15 to 74 years. Finally, the ILO defined labour force was just over 2,341,000, with an associated participation rate of 58.9%, and those not in the labour force was nearly 1,633,000. The results presented today may not show the impact that would have been expected from COVID-19, and this is due to the application of the ILO criteria to persons who were away from work during the reference week but had a job to return to, or those who had lost their job. This meant that many of these persons were either still classified as employed or failed to meet the criteria for being classified as unemployed and thus defaulted to being classified as inactive. In Q2, all persons who were away from work during the reference week but had a job to return to either expected to return to work within 3 months or were paid at least half their wage or salary while they were absent. Therefore, these persons were still considered to have an attachment to the job and thus were classified as being in employment according to the ILO criteria. For those persons interviewed in Q2 of this year and that had lost their job in 2020, a different picture emerges. Just 5% of those people were classified as unemployed, while the remainder were classified as inactive. And this was due primarily to being available for work but not seeking work, or that they did not want paid work. Additionally, the CSO were able to link the ELFS data for Q2 with revenue data in respect of recipients of the Temporary Wage Subsidy Scheme, or the TWSS, and the Department of Employment and Social Protection data for those in receipt of the Pandemic Unemployment Payment, or the PUP. This linking of data was done in accordance with CSO data matching protocols. When the ILO criteria was applied to this matched data, nearly 71.7% of persons in receipt of PUP at the time of interview were classified as employed. Just 4.4% were classified as unemployed, while 23.9% were classified as being inactive. A higher proportion of TWSS recipients at 92.6% were classified as employed, while less than 1% were unemployed and 6.6% were classified as being inactive. Some further information on TWSS and PUP recipients is available in the Insights Bulletin, which is also published today. Returning now to employment, and the slide behind me compares the annual change in employment with that of total actual hours worked during the reference week for Q2. Of the total of 2.2 million in employment in Q2, there was just over 552,000 people who were away from work during the reference week, and this had increased substantially from a year earlier. The reasons for absence would include temporary layoff due to slack work, family-related leave, and holidays, for example. As explained earlier, these persons were classified as employed under the ILO criteria. The extent of these absences from work during the reference week resulted in a 22.1% reduction in total actual hours worked to 59.2 million in Q2. Male unemployment fell by 35,800 or 2.9% over the year, while female employment was down by 41,700 or 3.9%. Full-time and part-time employment both fell over the year. Full-time employment was down by 1.1%, while part-time employment fell by 12.5%. Nearly 90% of the reduction in part-time employment was for females. Part-time underemployment was 107,400 in Q2, and this accounted for 26.6% of total part-time employment. Turning now to economic sectors, and employment fell in 7 of the economic sectors over the year. The greater rates of decrease were the accommodation and food services sector. That was down by 29.6% or 53,600. The other NACE activity sector was down by 19.1% or 22,900. The administration and support sector was down by 17.2% or 18,800. And finally, construction was down by 12.1% or 17,800. On the other hand, the greater rates of increase were in the financial, insurance and real estate activity sector, and that was up by 17.1% or 19,300. The information and communication sector was up by 14.7% or 17,300. The number of self-employed persons and the number of employees both fell over the year. The number of self-employed persons fell by 2.9%, while the number of employees fell by 3.6%. Seasonally adjusted employment was also 2,225,500 in quarter 2, and this represented a reduction of 6.3% or nearly 150,000 people on a quarter-on-quarter basis. Turning now to unemployment, and again using the standard ILO definitions, the unemployment rate was 5.1% in quarter 2 of this year. In volume terms, there were 64,800 males and 54,000 females classified as unemployed. Male unemployment was down by 11.3% over the year, while female unemployment was down by 6.6%. The long-term unemployment rate, that is persons unemployed for 12 months or longer, was 1.1% in quarter 2, and that was down from 1.1% a year earlier. There were 25,700 persons classified as long-term unemployed in quarter 2 of this year, and this accounted for 21.6% of all unemployed. On a seasonally adjusted basis, the unemployment rate remained the same at 4.9% over the quarter. In volume terms, the seasonally adjusted number of persons unemployed was down by 6.6% to just 114,000 over the quarter. Moving now to the labour force. The total number of persons in the labour force in quarter 2 was down by 3.7% to just over 2,341,000. In terms of decomposing the change in the labour force, there was a positive demographic effect of 26,600 and a negative participation effect of 116,200. On a seasonally adjusted basis, the labour force fell by 131,700 or 5.3% over the quarter to just over 2,345,000 in quarter 2 of this year. That completes the data element of this presentation this morning. And now I'll just move to give you some information on forthcoming releases from the labour market and earnings area. Up next is the live register and monthly unemployment estimates for August 2020, and these will be published on the 1st and the 3rd of September respectively. The earnings, hours and labour cost survey results for quarter 2 will be published on the 8th of September. The Labour Force Survey Household and Family Unit series for quarter 2 of this year is scheduled to be published in October of this year, and further updates will be advised on the CSO release calendar with regard to the actual date. We'll be working further on the series of labour market insights over the next couple of months, and again further updates will follow on the release calendar in relation to the release dates. Finally, the results for the Q3 2020 LFS are scheduled to be published on the 17th of November next. And as always, users should check the CSO release calendar for upcoming releases. So in summary today, firstly, the results for quarter 2, like previous quarters, are compiled according to the ILO definitions and concepts. The ILO methodology does not fully capture the effect of COVID-19 on the labour market. However, the supplementary estimates being provided today should give some further additional insight into the figures. While today's results show that employment fell by 3.4% in the year to quarter 2 2020, the number of employed persons who were away from work when interviewed had increased by 405,700 or 276.7% over the year. This led to a fall of 16.8 million or 22.1% in the number of actual hours worked in quarter 2 of this year. This concludes the presentation for this morning. I'll now open the floor to any questions. Thank you very much.